some slides with content as well. So let's just look in our index.html here. We're going to need a number of these slides here within our testimonial div there. That's the container which is going to be holding all our slides. Now we're going to define this container in our little initiation code. What it's going to do is treat each of its child elements as a slide. I can instantly see that there's a mistake here because it's going to treat this div, our slide nav, as one of its child elements, and it's going to treat it like a slide, and we don't want that because this is supposed to be outside of our actual slideshow. So now let's pump in a load more slides. I've prepared some which I can just copy and paste in just to speed things up as usual. So if I copy those, and let's see, where are we? We'll put a new slide underneath our first one here. So there we go, that's 4 slides, all of which are sitting in our testimonial container there. Let's just Command and S save that, and then we'll preview it by refreshing the page. So there you can see we have 4 nice testimonial quotes. Very nice. Obviously we don't want it to display like this though, that's a bit of a mess, and once the jQuery plugin kicks in, it's going to be just displaying these one at a time and cycling through them. Now the problem is we're going to be adding our code, our JavaScript, to the bottom of our page. The reason we do this is that it has to load. Our page loads from the top all the way down to the bottom, and if we put it into our head, none of this will load until our JavaScript has loaded. Now we don't actually need any of our JavaScript until all this content and all its associated styling is dealt with, so that's a little bit wasteful. We're going to be presenting our users with just a blank screen, even if it's just for a microsecond while everything's loading. So we're better off loading all the content and then loading our JavaScript. That does mean that for however briefly they're going to be presented with this before our JavaScript kicked in. So it's a good idea now. Let me just zoom out so we can see it. I'm going to make a screenshot of this just to demonstrate what we're going to be doing. If I just grab that like so, and then I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. What we need to do is grab our testimonial container element, and we're going to define its dimensions properly, like so. We're going to give it a fixed height, and then we're going to apply the CSS rule overflow hidden, which means that anything within that div which flows beyond its boundaries is going to be hidden. So we're actually going to be sort of creating a sort of window effect here. We're going to be hiding all these additional slides from view as soon as the page is loaded, so that will neaten things up. So let's go straight into our CSS. If I jump into Coda there, there we go. Now in our testimonial section, we're just going to apply that to our testimonial. That was our container element. We're going to give it a height of 200 pixels, and as I've said, we're going to give it overflow property of hidden. Now saving that, jumping back into here, I reset the zoom, I'm going to reset the page, and now you can see it's only displaying the first of those divs. The others are all hidden from view, so that's much neater. Now let's concentrate on actually getting this code into our page. As I said, we're going to be introducing the jQuery and the cycle plugin to the bottom of our page. So let me just grab those and pump those in just before the closing body tag. This is where our jQuery is going to go. So if I recall, it was on the Google server. I'm going to paste that in like so. Once that's loaded, we can then load our plugin, which is in our JavaScript folder. So if I just put in a relative path to that, that's going to load those two up, and then we just need to instantiate everything. So we're going to hook it up. There we go. going to need some more script tags in that case. Again, of type text JavaScript. Now this is where we're going to place our code to instantiate the whole lot. Now we're going to kick off with the ready event method. Now what this does is it houses all the code that we're going to use to get our plugin working. There it is. Okay. Everything we're going to use is going to sit within this ready method. It basically waits until all our documents has finished loading before it allows anything within it to be executed. Now, as all our JavaScript requires all the contents, such as all the slideshow elements and its appropriate styling, it needs those to be all ready and waiting before it kicks in. So that just prevents any hiccups there. So having done that, we now need to add our actual instantiation code. Let me just copy and paste that in there as well. Okay, there it is. Let's just comment that so that we can remember what we're doing here. This was the cycle plugin. Okay, and as you can see, we're targeting the testimonial div, the class of testimonial, and we're applying the cycle method to it. And here we are adding a couple of options to that method, which override the default options that come with the cycle plugin. We're assigning an effect of fade. That's very straightforward. It could be any number of any one of a number of animations with various easing levels and all sorts of things. We're going to keep it simple with just a fade there, and we want our pager, all those paging links, to be injected into our slide nav div. So if we go back up to our slide nav div, you can see it here. So all these links that we manually put in, we don't actually need anymore. Okay, so there, that's neatened that up. There it is. Okay, so it's as simple as that. We've called a jQuery, we've called the plugin, and we've instantiated it here. So now if I save that, and I go back to our browser window to reset, we can see there's a little bit of a hiccup on the layout there, but aside from that, you'll see it's cycling through all those slides which we put in our markup, and these links work exactly as they should be doing as well. Now the reason this is here is, I imagine, because there is a default width to the slides. This was positioned absolutely, if you remember, so it's obviously not wide enough, its parent element. So we'll go back to our CSS, and its parent was of course slide, so I'm just going to make that the same width as the wrapper container. So I'll save that and reset it. Okay, and you see that's positioned it properly again on the right hand side. So there you go, that serves our purposes perfectly well. We have our slideshow, we have our testimonials, and it all works very neatly. Okay, it's time as usual for some further reading, so I'm going to jump into the presentation once again. There we go. Now this is a series by Jeffrey Way, who knows a thing or two about jQuery, for absolute beginners. If you need clarification about downloading, implementing and using jQuery, this series is well worth a look. Now before we jump into the next video, I'd like you to practice what we've just done and implement the Mulsup jQuery cycle plugin. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to look at the last bit of our jQuery behavior by styling our form and applying some validation. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to continue with the behavioral aspect of our corporate website by implementing some form validation. We'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Firstly, we'll take a look at what form validation is. Then we'll move on to our own project and update our CSS to style the form. Once that's done, we'll look at using a jQuery validation plugin. Lastly, as ever, I'll point you towards some further reading and set an assignment. Now, we've discussed forms before while we were designing our own, and we mentioned that forms are a classic potential stumbling block for users. One aspect of ensuring good usability on a form is to implement good form validation. We need users to understand what is required of them, and in the event of them not complying, by neglecting to fill in crucial information for example, we need them to be made clearly aware of it. Correct completion of a form is also often necessary for the form to actually work. If an email address is incorrectly entered, that could have problematic consequences. So how do we validate form data? Well, we need to check what's been entered as soon as the form is submitted. This can be done server-side, i.e. the data is checked by a PHP or ASP Ruby script for example, then in the event of a problem returns to the form to alert the user. We can also do this client-side by using JavaScript, which is what we're going to be doing using a jQuery plugin. In our case, the data is going to be checked real-time in the browser. It's also possible these days to use validation native to HTML5. Now this is in its early stages of implementation of course, and not all browsers support it, but it will no doubt become standard relatively soon. For now though, let's jump into our CSS and clean up our own form. We'll leave our presentation there and remind ourselves what we were supposed to be dealing with by jumping into the PSD. This is what we were aiming for. And now if we open up our browser, we can see what we currently have. Now it's a long way to go, but actually there are only a few relatively simple rules required to get that looking ship shape. So let's open Coda, our project, and we'll begin at the bottom of our CSS file. Actually, it's about time I moved this clear fix stuff to the top because it's a sort of a general set of rules. Now we'll begin with our form styling at the bottom of our CSS. So we'll leave that there. Now the first thing we need to do is address the issue of the inputs and the text areas. Sorry, there was only one. They need significant styling. For a kickoff, they need to be the full width of our column, and I'm going to give them a bit of padding as well, and text indent just to shove the text. Oops, sorry, where is it? Within that field, a couple of pixels in, just to suggest more padding. Okay, that's looking better already. Now let's remove all the borders and the outlines, aside from, of course, that sizable green border which we placed on the bottom. This also defines some of the height and the line height of the input. There we go. Now instantly we've made a significant difference, and that's looking much more effective. We now need to apply a specific couple of styles to the text area because that differs in some ways, namely the height. So I'm going to just grab a rule for that. Again, you'll have to excuse me copying and pasting all the time, but the clock is ticking, I'm afraid, so I'm going to keep it brief. Okay, that's looking good. We now need to make sure that our label at the top there has a similar margin on the bottom to our paragraphs in order to bump down these inputs just to keep things nicely in line on the baseline grid there. So if I grab a rule for that, stick that in there, that displays our labels as a block and gives them a margin on the bottom. Okay, that's much neater. I do actually need to increase the size of that image whilst I'm about it. This was our map image, if you recall, that we're pulling from the Google Maps server. That's just going to bring our form nicely in line. Now there is one issue which is causing that to be slightly further down, and that is this required notification, which we're actually going to position absolutely within the parent paragraph tag. So that's going to fit up there and not be pushing anything further down. So in order for that to work, we'll first need a position of relative on our paragraph itself. So that's just saying that with any paragraph tags within our contact form are going to have that position of relative. Now if I grab our little error label styling, like so, I'll put that underneath here. And you can see I'm positioning it absolutely at the top and 5 pixels inwards. And the text is also aligned to the right, and I've given the whole thing a width of 80% just to arbitrarily stick it there in the top corner. I'm giving it that red colour which we worked on in our document, in our PSD, and I've assigned the correct typeface, size and font style italic there. So if I just save that and refresh quickly, you'll see that it's instantly a great deal more effective, and that everything else is now lining up much more conveniently for us. Now all we need to do is throw some styles onto our button there. So I will grab those simply like so. Now it looks complex, but there's not an awful lot going on here actually. I've added a WebKit transition just to experiment with the transition in Chrome, which we're testing in at the moment. You can see I've assigned a width and a height of 60 pixels, also a line height of 60 pixels, which is going to vertically center our text. Text align center deals with the horizontal centering. Then I've applied a margin to shunt it over towards the right. This border radius of half its width and height is going to turn it into a nice neat circle for us, with a background of that green color, no outline or border, and crucially I've assigned the cursor to be a pointer cursor, because we need to make it clear when we hover over our button that it actually behaves like a button. Let's now just give it a hover state by lightening the color and darkening the text like so. And that transition has made that just a little bit smoother for us. Now of course we can apply a similar idea that we did with our social links, because if I open up the PSD again, we did actually in our sprite cater for this button by adding a circle for both the normal and the hover states. So by editing our IE CSS file, we can actually make sure that in Internet Explorer older versions which don't support this styling can actually have a similar effect. Okay, so that's all style. That's looking a lot better. Now all we need to do is take care of this error alert dynamically. We're going to actually go and grab our validation plugin now and concentrate on implementing it into our site. Now this is the basassistents.e website. This is courtesy of Jorn Zaffera. Apologies if I've said that wrong, I undoubtedly have. He's one of the main contributors to the jQuery library. So this is a rock solid plugin with years of development behind it, and it's been used on some pretty big sites as well. So we're just going to grab it from the download link like so, and there it is straight away. I'm going to show that in the Finder and remove the browser window. Now we're going to unzip it, and you can see there's an awful lot that comes with it, some various demos and ideas, but actually we need very little of this. We really just need to grab either the whole main script or the minimized version. It makes very little difference which. So I'm going to grab the main validation script and just plug that straight into our JavaScript folder in our project. Now in a very similar fashion to our slideshow script, we basically just need to reference it underneath our having referenced jQuery to begin with. Let's make sure I name this correctly. That is validate. Classic opportunity to mess things up with a typo there. Okay, and now all that remains to do, having referenced it, is call the functions methods in our document ready method. So it's very similar syntax, which is why I've just copied and pasted that. We'll just comment that to make sure we know what we're dealing with. Now we're going to be targeting our contact form through its class contact form there. So I'll just paste that in there, and we are just calling the validate method. Simple as that. We're not doing anything fancy. We're just letting the whole thing do its job. So we're going to save that, and that is everything there that needed to be done. One more thing, we actually need to prepare our form for the script. We need to determine what we need to be required, if anything, and various other data validation. We'll get rid of this label here because that was our manual bit of static markup. That's all going to be dealt with dynamically. Now, in order for our name input to be declared required, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to give it a class of required. Simple as that. The same applies to our email input. One more class is needed there because we need that to be treated as an email. We need to make sure that a valid email is inputted in here. Our message will just leave as it is. So we'll hit save. Where is my site? Excuse me, there we go. Let's refresh that, and then hopefully that's dealt with everything we needed. So I'll hit send, and you can see there that this field is required, and if I just type some gibberish into the email field, you can see that we are required to enter a valid email address. That's perfectly clear. Actually, there's one thing missing because our PSD actually catered for slightly more clarity. We added a red border to the bottom of our error input, so I'm going to add that as well. This is our label error here, so all I need to do is overwrite the initial border by placing it slightly afterwards. Now this dictates that any input with a class of error, which is what's assigned by the script, is now going to get a 5-pixel border of our red. Save that. Refresh my page, and there we go. There's our border. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. Does the job. So, time for some further reading as always. Jump back into our presentation. There we go. Now we mentioned the most recent alternative to our jQuery form validation, and that is the native HTML5 validation. If you'd like to know more about its potential and its current drawbacks, take a look at what Peter Gaston has to say on the matter. Now, before we move into the next video, I'd like you to continue with our design, grab the form validation plugin, and bring the site up to date. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to look at cross-browser testing. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us at here at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to talk about cross-browser testing. We'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. First off, we're going to talk about the whys and the whens of cross-browser testing. We'll then look at a couple of examples, after which we'll take a provisional look at our own design in various browsers. Before we finish up, I'll suggest some further reading and set an assignment. Now, we've spoken before about various browsers and how they have a habit of dealing with markup and styling in different ways. We spoke about graceful degradation and progressive enhancement, and we also catered in our own design for early versions of Internet Explorer. You'll remember I used Adobe Browser Lab to quickly test how our design was rendered in IE versions 8 and 7. Well, now we're going to talk about a couple of options where testing your work across different browsers is concerned. So what are the options? Well, the easiest and most foolproof way to test across browsers is to have multiple installations. In its simplest form, this would mean having Firefox, Opera, Safari and Chrome all running on your machine. If you're on Windows, then you can run Internet Explorer alongside too. I usually work on a Mac, but I have a laptop running Windows so I can test my sites relatively easily in a wide spectrum of browsers. Now, some browsers don't allow multiple versions to run simultaneously on the same system, such as Internet Explorer, so in order to have several versions you can either buy a load of computers or run a virtual machine by using a tool such as VMware's Fusion. Another way of testing across various browsers is to use a screenshot service such as Adobe Browser Lab, which we'll look at in a moment, or Browser Shots, for example. These are tools which use their own machines to grab screenshots of your website and send them back to you. They work very effectively for simply checking how things are rendered, but they are limited in that they don't allow for any interaction. Interactivity can be achieved by using a simulator service such as Spoon's browser tools. There are lots of examples, some of which run in your browser, others require you to run a downloadable application. Now, the advantage of running virtual browsers is that you can test your website with all its bells and whistles. You can play embedded video, interact with any JavaScript, follow links, experience your hover states, and even log into secure sessions. Now, before we look at our design with Adobe Browser Lab, it's worth mentioning that cross-browser testing should be performed early on and often while building a website. By testing each time a significant change is made, you're more likely to save yourself headaches further down the line. Okay, let's have a look at our own website. I'll just escape from the presentation and I'll open up Google Chrome, and there you can see it in its current state, all behaving very nicely, as you'd expect in Google Chrome. But now if we take a look in Adobe Browser Lab, first I'm going to grab that URL, copy that. We'll have a look in Adobe Browser Lab. Now in order to use this, you're going to need an account by Adobe, so go and sign yourself up, and then you can just log in and play around. It's very straightforward. You have various selections of different browsers which you can use to take a screenshot of any given URL. So let's just pop in our designated URL there. We're loading Internet Explorer 9 at the moment. While that's running, I want to just quickly open up Coda because I noticed last time there were a couple of things in the code which I wanted to just improve upon. For example, at the bottom of our index.html, you'll see I've used the type text JavaScript in my script tags, and that's a habit I still haven't shaken. In HTML5 that's no longer necessary because the type of text JavaScript is implied. It's a default, so we don't even need to suggest what type we're using there. So that's cleaned up our HTML a little bit, and now I just wanted to improve one thing, which was in the style CSS. I'd assigned the wrong group, the wrong class to our little IE7 and IE6 hacks there on our clear fix. So that's improved that. I'm now going to publish those back up to the web version. Okay, now you can see back in Browser Lab we have our IE9 version already rendered. That looks great. There are no problems with that from what I can make out. However, we're going to now check IE8. Let's see how that's going. There we go. Oh, okay, that's lovely. You'll remember we'd already witnessed this once, so that wasn't entirely an entire shock for me there. And IE7, we'll check that as well. Now you can use various bits and bobs up here. For example, if part of our rendering was reliant on JavaScript, we could delay the screenshot, say by 10 seconds before the screenshot was actually taken. Now IE7 isn't having quite so many problems. They are both having issues with clearing these floats by the look of it. They both have this send button for our form, which we haven't yet catered for using our sprite PNG, and they've both assigned a background color to our slide here for some reason. Okay, so these are all problems in Internet Explorer. I happen to know that the Chrome is fine and that all other browsers are fine. I can check in Firefox here, for example, as well, just to show you. We've already assigned our own little IE CSS file, so we can neatly just deal with all these problems separate from the rest of our code. Come on, just finish this and then we'll get on with it. Okay, and you can see Firefox also, they're having no great issues. Okay, let's just get rid of that then. So we'll move into our IE CSS. The first thing we're going to do is deal with our button. we're going to use a very simple principle, exactly the same as we did with our social buttons here. We're just going to redefine the dimensions slightly, because it needs to be slightly smaller, and we're going to assign the sprite PNG as its background. Now we're also going to give it a hover state, of course. So let's just plonk this in here, like so, and that was exactly the same, but we had to shift our sprite another 100 pixels vertically upwards. Okay, so we save that. That's that done. Open Chrome again, and let's just quickly where are we? Let's quickly reset IE8. Okay, so that's dealt with our button perfectly well there. Okay. Secondly, we need to get rid of this horrendous white background. So we'll assign the same background as the rest of our oh, that's not right there, is it? That's the rest of our backgrounds. That's the subtle freckles ping. I've already sort of played around with this, as you can probably tell, because fixing many of these broken things in Internet Explorer can take an awful long time, and it's not something you particularly want to witness whilst my slow brain figures it all out. Okay, let's fix these broken clearing float things. That just wasn't working, was it? Now, it took me a while to figure out exactly what the problem was here, and I still haven't actually worked it out, but I did work out that by floating the sections and the footer to the left and giving them a width of 100% to make sure they fill the page as well, the clearing then took effect. So let's grab Chrome again and go and reset our browser screenshot. There we go. Okay, and you can see that for whatever reason, having floated my main sections, those elements there, the clear fix has now taken effect. So that's fine, it's solved, and that's all I need to be concerned about. And the same applies to IE7. Okay, very good. It is just worth restating that even though Adobe Browser Labs recognizes links, and we can follow links to move to different pages, it obviously can't recreate any of the JavaScript effects, such as our form validation or our slideshow. So we can't actually test the effectiveness of those in older browsers. Okay, let's get rid of this. We've dealt with that for the time being, so we'll get rid of that. And it's now time once again for some further reading. Now I'd like you to check out this poll we ran on Web Design Tuts, where we asked readers about their preferred methods of cross-browser testing. You can go and see the results for yourself, and there's also a much more exhaustive list of cross-browser testing tools. Before we jump into the next video, I have an assignment for you. I'd like you to familiarize yourself with a testing tool of some kind. Use the source code from the previous video, which I hadn't at that point corrected for Internet Explorer, and play around with it. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to finish things off by looking at Google Analytics. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to quickly implement Google Analytics. We'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Firstly, we'll look at implementing Google Analytics before we take a look at some of the basic usage, and then I'm going to suggest some further reading and set a very simple task. Now, Google Analytics is a very useful tool, and in the last few years it's become common practice to implement it in any site. There are alternative tools for tracking your traffic, but Google Analytics is free, it's hugely capable, and it's growing all the time. Let's quickly go to our site and implement Google Analytics as we go. Now here we have our site open in Coda. I did want to just mention a couple of changes I've made before we jump into Analytics. Last time, you remember, I cleaned up a little bit of the code. I've since condensed some of the lines just to trim things down a little bit, but not an awful lot has happened in the HTML markup. However, in our CSS file, by our ClearFix group of rules, I did have a couple of lines which were Internet Explorer specific. They were these little hacks here for IE6 and IE7. With no need to have those in our main style sheet. They're just padding things out unnecessarily, so I've stuck those in our specific style sheet for Internet Explorer. Now if we open up Chrome, you'll see that I've made a couple of changes to the design itself just to bring it totally up to date with our PSD. I brought our menu items for our primary navigation down to be in line horizontally with our logo there. I've added a little more spacing around these images and added this horizontal border on top of our section there. And lastly, there is this vertical line in between our map and our form. That takes everything totally up to date. The design, the markup, the CSS, it's all completely done and dusted. So now let's go over to Google Analytics and grab some tracking code. Now in order to set yourself up with Analytics, you're going to need a Google account. Assuming you have that, you can then just go and enter Google Analytics and add as many domains as you like, pretty much. Assuming you stay within certain traffic boundaries, you won't have to pay anything either. Those boundaries are fairly high, so I wouldn't worry about those. Now we're setting up a new profile here. I'm just going to use our fictional domain name here. So I'm going to add that as a URL, as a new domain. In principle, we're in Australia, in Melbourne, so having set up our location and our time zone, we click on Finish. Simple as that. Now we're presented with some tracking code. You'll notice we have our unique identifier here, and that's also present in our code. And we're being told that the tracking hasn't been installed. This simply means that we haven't put the code within our markup. So let's grab that, Command and C to copy it, and then we'll move over to Coda and put it in our index.html. Now it's recommended you put it in your head. You could also put it down in the footer, just like we have done with our other JavaScript bits and bobs. You remember the reason for doing that was to aid our page loading time, and that would in fact continue along that sort of theory if we were to add our code here. But Google Analytics do recommend you stick it within your head tags just before your closing head there. Let's just push that over. The reason being that there is a chance, just comment that so I know where we are. There is a chance people will enter your page and leave before the whole page has had time to properly render. That would mean that your Google Analytics tracking code doesn't have time to register the page visit. Putting it in your head does increase that chance. So we'll save that, I'll push that to the web, and that's then done. So it will take quite a bit of time for that to register, 24 hours or so. It will keep checking, and then at a certain point you'll be rewarded with a nice green tick there to show that your tracking has been installed. Once that's the case, you can then start analysing your metrics, which you'll be presented with on a dashboard similar to this. Now you can clearly see your visitor numbers, you can see your page views, you can see your bounce rate, for example. You remember we discussed that earlier in the series. You can see the locations of your users and all sorts of things. Now it's all very well to observe your visitor numbers rising and falling like this, but the true value is in understanding why your site behaves as it does and reacting upon that. You can use notations, for example, add a little notation to the 26th of September there. We'll say it's my birthday. It's not true, but we'll put that in anyway. That could be a significant influence on things, you never know. That's just one such example. You can observe the most active times of the day. Let's have a look at visits here, and then we'll change the metric by hourly. There we go. We can see at what time of the day the most activity occurs. You can lay out funnels, for example, and goals. You remember we talked about those as well. Let's just have a quick look in goals here. I haven't actually set any up, so that's not remotely exciting. But where have we got funnel visualization? You can see funnels there as well. Now, funnels are routes through your site which observe how effectively people navigate to the goals that you set out. Now, reacting to the data and improving your site as a result is the true value to implementing Google Analytics. There's so much information available, but the first hurdle is, of course, implementing it and collecting the data. Okay, it's time for some further reading. I've mentioned this one before, but actually that was all the way at the beginning of the series, and it applies equally well on this occasion. A Beginner's Guide to Successful Conversion looks in more detail at setting up and analyzing goals and funnels within Google Analytics. Now, I'd like you now to sign up for an Analytics account if you don't already have one, and implement Google Analytics on your site. Okay, that just about wraps things up. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching. Hi guys, well done. You've reached the end of 30 days to your first website design, a Tuts Plus premium course. We've come a long way, and I hope you've picked up some useful information as we've done so. Remember, website design isn't simply about throwing pieces together in Photoshop. It isn't just markup, styling and JavaScript trickery. It's about decision making. With any luck, you're now aware of the types of decisions which need to be made throughout the process. So take what you've learnt and have fun using your new skills in the real world. My name's Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, including John, Barry and Kenneth, thanks very much for watching.